Hello, one and all! It's about time we get back to talking about the lore and story of the Radical-9 saga. Last time we covered the end of the Apocalypse timeline. If you haven't watched the first two parts of the series, you definitely should, otherwise you may be a bit confused on certain aspects. With that out of the way, we're going to be returning to the year 1999 as we have a new timeline to investigate further, which I'm going to dub as the Logos timeline. We've got some important context to get out of the way though before we move forward, and additionally, given the fact that this is an alternate timeline to the one we were following from before, that means some details are going to remain the same for the content we've covered, so if something sounds familiar to last time, that's why. And when any changes crop up, I'll definitely be making that clear. Now, before we actually do tackle the beginning of this new timeline, there is one detail that I brought up a little bit in the first part of this series, but since events moving forward are going to be dealing with it more, I think we should cover it in more detail. This world is much like our own, but there is one major point in convergence that I've hesitated going into a lot of detail on, and that is the state of the world after the Second World War. I'm not going to be getting into the weeds of this, but instead of the United States of America being the global superpower at the end of the war, in its place is the United Kingdom. From this, the 30 years or so after the end of the war were a very tumultuous period, where I'm still open to writing new stories in, but I don't have any specific ideas at this exact moment, so I'm going to call this a nebulous zone, as what exactly happens in this period could be one of the many things, but will only be determined when it's actually been given time to look upon. However, in the 1970s, the United Kingdom, under rule of its new queen, a character who we'll be going over in much more detail later on, has designated rule over the United States by way of established leaders that are still denoted as presidents, even though they are the furthest thing from a democratically elected leader. Starting in 1972, the President of the United States is Hal Valhart, of which in Telos, Gavin recalls seeing a television broadcast of his inauguration speech. President Hal Valhart. He was a rather charming man. He was who England gave to us after the full annexation of the United States to the British Empire. This was back sometime in the 70s. I remember seeing the recording of his first time on the podium in front of a live nation. I'm certain you've all heard the rumors that I'm being sent here under the direct authority of blah blah blah. Listen, I volunteered for this position because I know you're all going through a rough time. It isn't easy going through change on this scale. I know you see me as the bad guy, but I want you all to know that I have what is best for you, so that we can all get along. They could have sent over someone way worse who could have ruled with an iron fist, but I want us all to be open. So I'll be taking questions now to help ascertain anything I need to do to help make this whole thing work. A single hand in the crowd goes up. It's a reporter who seems to nearly be jumping out of her seat. Yes, the lovely lady in front. A microphone is passed around to the crowd and it reaches the woman. Yeah, I'm sure you're a nice man and all, but that means jack diddly to you are as a leader. What if we don't like you or what you do? Valhart smiles, but it isn't menacing. It seems warm. He's radiated this sort of security at almost all times. You see, I know I'm not going to be able to please everyone, so for those of you who dislike how things are here, I'll give you one piece of advice. The Queen isn't as forgiving as I am, not by a long shot. If word gets around to her that things aren't going well here, she's not going to hesitate to pull the plug in this country. Do you understand? The reporter is speechless. I don't want that to happen. I was an aficionado of pre-war American culture, and would absolutely hate to see such beautiful memories be erased forever. I'm on your side, but, and this is a big but, if you do find your new living conditions unbearable, find a way out. And with that said, we're going to now go back to 1999 to cover the Logos timeline, with all of this in context. Gavin Daniels is born in Athens, Ohio, on March 1st, 1999, to Gregory and Lorraine Daniels. Megan Adata is born to Jack Adata and Pamela Foster in Denver, Colorado, on May 25th, 1999. Grace Jackson is born to Brian and Sharon Jackson on December 20th, 2002. In Aurora, Colorado, Andrew Cress is born on July 4th, 2003, to David and Elena Cress. Aria Avery is born to Oliver Avery and an unknown mother on February 14th, 2004, in the United Kingdom. There had always been rumors spreading of NASA finding life-changing materials on a more recent trip to the moon. the trip that had begun the installation of the Sostenio series of lunar bases set up for life and research up on the moon. These reports were misleading in truth, but they caught the attention of the Freeman's Word, a group of freelance journalists whose mission it was to combat corporation scandal and investigate private information holds as it spreads to among the public, a new age of yellow journalism. Brian Jackson, founder of the Freeman's Word, tasked Jean Armando, an associate of his, to research NASA and the evidence of the unit's creation to study extraterrestrial material. Jean begins her work undercover, applying as a bookkeeper to the organization's unit in Denver. It turns out they'd previously been holding office space under the name of the American Lung Association as to keep attention away from the work they'd been doing. If anybody had any serious inquiries about the ALA, then the head manager would direct them to inquire about their eastern branch over in New York. They would then repeat the process and redirect them back to the western branch, and keep it going ad infinitum until the inquirer lost interest. Jean Armando was not one such inquirer to lose interest so easily, so after the initial redirect of the in-time secretary, Jean posted upon herself to remote hack into one of the building servers using a custom-rigged computer to break into one of their secure networks. Inside, she discovers a plethora of encrypted information, much that looks to be way too complicated to belong to the servers of the American Lung Association. Jean's new discovery doesn't last long as the building shuts down in defense from the cyber attack. Her hack is countered as it locks her computer up, and subsequently begins displaying her location from the counter-hack, unknown to Jean. She begins driving away from the building. She is sure that there are massive secrets being held by those that work in the Republic Plaza. She doesn't know why else they would need that level of security. As she continues to drive back to Colorado to San Francisco, she doesn't realize she's actually being tailed by hired guns from those that worked in the Republic Plaza. Turns out that those working there were an origin project of the idea of testing new chemical weapons in the depths of space, weapons that would be kept by the United States government as a trump card, should they ever want to formally give up their title as a democracy. It also turns out that the workers inside the building had been communicating with several war veterans who knew the high and low of weapon severity, and had used their information in accordance to their designs. These two are Gunther Ward and Leonard Stone. Once their security alarm sounds, they realize they are being attacked through one of their networks. They hop onto the action double time and shut out the attack. Confused as to how someone had broken through their signal, they trace the origins of the attack to a computer signal, most likely not natural. They run a counter-trace and begin searching out the one that had attempted the hack. Not wanting to risk the information of their work being leaked out and causing World War III, they send the veterans well armed to take care of the possible threat. And they're happy to oblige. Ward and Stone track Jean all the way back to San Francisco. It is here that they realize where Jean works. Ward signals his info in and receives a call back saying to torch the place. They do as they are instructed. Fire is set to the Freeman's Word, and it spreads quickly. All but Brian Jackson and Jean Armando perish in the fire, as in this timeline she is able to make it out alive. Brian manages to make it with fragments of the data that he had pulled from Jean's computer. He realizes that he's potentially in more danger than he could have ever believed, and begins packing up his things. This causes conflict at home, as Brian forces himself to keep quiet about the fire. He doesn't want them to know the danger he could be in, and thus involve them. He leaves without another word, keeping himself together as his wife screams at him from the inside. He knows she'll take good care of their kids while he goes into witness protection. Turns out back at the Republic Plaza, the workers who have been testing the chemical weapons have long since deserted their workstations. Both Leonard Stone and Gunther Ward are nowhere to be found, after a piece of cloth with their DNA is found at the scene of the Freeman's Word building. The building is listed as in reservations, but no real changes are made to the layout of the interior. Lindsay Barron is born to two parents who are such awful people they don't even deserve to be named on September 24th, 2005, in Aurora, Colorado. In the middle of August 2006, NASA buys out the building and designs a unit to research materials from space, which eventually ends up becoming the research lab for the Prometheans. Gregory and Lorraine Daniels are separated for work in 2007, with Lorraine as a project director at the eastern branch of the Empire State Building, while Gregory moves to Denver with their son, Gavin, to work with NASA's western branch. A year later, Gregory teams up with Jack Adada to research two new elements, lantrate and dicoberine, for a lucrative opportunity. Unbeknownst to Gregory, these elements pose significant dangers. Jack, who originally obtained the elements from his father before his execution, discovers more on Mars during a 2007 space mission. During an experiment, Jack accidentally burns Gregory's arm with sulfuric acid, due to a mistake caused by his prosopagnosia. Now, I realize I dropped this condition on you last time and didn't give any further context on it, So I'm going to do that now. Prosopagnosia is a cognitive disorder that makes it difficult for people to recognize faces. A layman's name for this is face blindness. Now, some people think that people with prosopagnosia don't see faces at all, taking the blind part of face blindness a little too literally. In reality, they can see faces, but recognizing separate people from facial details becomes much harder. So, for example, if you were to be put in a room with several monkeys, assuming you have no training in handling monkeys, it would be difficult to differentiate between one monkey from another based on their facial features alone. If you spent time with them, surely you could build up some sort of trick to get an idea of which monkey is George, which monkey is Kevin, and this sort of process is similar to what people who have prosopagnosia tend to have to do in order to adapt to their condition. Anyway, back to the story. Gregory, along with scientists Jay Ryan, Mason Radica, David Cress, and Jack Adata, all began research on the new elements under the project name of the Prometheans. They were promised a pay raise and a chance to benefit humanity. They worked long hours in a renovated Republic Plaza, allowing them to live on-site with their children. Mason's daughter, Kate, oversees the other kids, including Gavin Daniels, Andrew Cress, and Megan Adata. During testing, they discovered that lantrate and dicobari react dangerously with calcium and radium. Meanwhile, Gregory becomes increasingly hostile towards Jack during the process. Now, there are a few methods of storytelling ahead that give us some clarity of events during this time. First are logs of journal entries written by Jack himself during the early stages as a Promethean. These are dubbed Year Zero. I'll be going over those first, since they are not going to be adjusted by any time travel shenanigans going on. Second are memories that Gavin receives as a result of being in contact with Radical-9. And the third is Gavin himself jumping into the past to experience these events under the alias of Nathan Denning. And finally, visions of different scenes being experienced by Andrew and Jen Cress in a similar way to Gavin. I'll be organizing all of this information in chronological order, but do note in some of these, Gavin's physical appearance in these times will mean that we are not seeing these events specifically outside of his influence. The Year Zero documents begin with a journal entry by Jack Adata dated March 30th, 2007, marking his first day as a freelance research scientist for NASA under contract with the British government. Jack is tasked with studying two secret materials, lantrate and dicobarine, recently discovered on Mars. He mentions that he hasn't met his colleagues yet and expresses nervousness about their upcoming introductions. In a subsequent entry from April 2nd, 2007, Jack discusses the same materials but redacts their names after being reprimanded for revealing classified information in his logs. He reflects on the potential of lantrate and dicobarine to achieve groundbreaking advancements, including the possibility of curing cancer, and dreams of a family vacation with his wife Pamela and daughter Megan if he were to receive a raise. Jack also notes his struggle to remember his coworkers' names and faces, hinting at deeper issue. He has prosopagnosia, a condition preventing him from recognizing such. He identifies his colleagues by other traits like hair and voice, which proves challenging since they're all wearing similar clothing. He mentions one coworker, Jay, whose wife has cancer. Jack's difficulties with recognition create a sense of tension as he navigates both the project and his relationships with the team. Now, back to the scientists and what is revealed, they worked in the Republic Plaza in Denver. It's still 2007, and a few months have passed. Work is continued on the lantrate and dicobarine, and the new faces enter the Republic Plaza, Mason Radica. So now, the scientists include Jack Adata, David Cress, Jay Ryan, Gregory Daniels, and Mason Radica. It's shown that Mason took the job so that he could have a place for his daughter and him to stay while he's earned some extra cash, as Mason's wife has passed away during childbirth. Mason's daughter, age 15, is tasked with watching over the children of the other scientists while her father works on the higher floors. Turns out that the other scientists struck similar deals, room and board plus a paying job to help support their families. At the current moment, the children she is watching over are Megan Adata, age 8, daughter of Jack Adata and Pamela Foster; Andrew Cress, age 4, son of David and Elena Cress. Andrew's the only case where David has his own house, where Andy would spend half of his time with Elena, and the other half of his time would be with his new friends at the Republic Plaza. Gavin Daniels, age 8, son of Gregory and Lorraine Daniels. Kate Radica, age 15. She's staying with her father and taking care of the other children while the scientists do their work. Of course, then we introduce Gavin into the mix as he's returning to this point in time from the Apocalypse timeline. Now, Gavin Daniels arrives in Denver after traveling by way of Icarus to the Logos timeline. He finds himself disoriented and lying beneath a large oak tree at the outskirts of the city. As he attempts to gather his bearings, he discovers he can communicate telepathically with Micah, the Gavin Daniels of the Apocalypse timeline, who reassures him that he's arrived in the right place. Micah urges Gavin to head to the Republic Plaza, a site connected to the research on the mysterious substance known as Radical-9. Gavin sets off toward the city. However, he notices the eerie absence of people on the streets. The atmosphere is noticeably thick with tension. When he reaches the Republic Plaza, he enters the building, where he meets Jean Armando. In a moment of improvisation, Gavin adopts the alias Nathan Denning and concocts a story about investigating illegal activities at the behest of President Valhart. Jean, intrigued by his supposed connection to Brian Jackson, allows him through. Inside, Gavin meets Mason Radica. Mason introduces Gavin to his daughter, Kate, who becomes his guide in the facility. As they explore, Gavin learns about the building's secretive operations, including a tragic incident involving a fire that claimed the life of a girl, being Maddie Gray about a year prior. Their journey leads them to the generator room, where Gavin absorbs crucial information about the facility's workings. During their conversation, Kate shares more about her past, revealing how she had to abandon school to care for the other children while her father works. Gavin, feeling a connection to her plight, shares his own tragic past, about his parents' deaths when he was young. As they ascend to the roof, Gavin is confronted by memories of his own traumatic past related to this location, including the very obvious moment where his own body will level this place in a decade's time. Overwhelmed by these memories, he struggles with feelings of nausea and disorientation, and just as he begins to regain composure, he immediately gets sucked back into the Apocalypse timeline, leaving this memory. On April 18, 2007, Gavin witnesses a tense moment involving the four scientists, his father, Gregory, David Cress, Mason Radica, and Jay Ryan. They are gathered around a computer console in a compact room divided by a glass wall, behind which Jack Adata, outfitted with goggles and gloves, prepares for an experiment with the hazardous elements lantrate and dicoberine. In the vision, Gregory informs Jack that the experiment's been ordered by Valhart at the request of the Queen. Jack, anxious due to a previous accident involving the corrosive acid, hesitates but ultimately agrees. As project lead, Gregory decided to push Jack hard on this assignment as a form of retribution for the previous accident. Despite Jay's protests that it was unfair to blame Jack, Gregory insisted they needed to conduct the tests, believing Jack to be the safest option. The materials Jack was combining, radium, calcium, lantrate, and dicoberine, resulted in a compound called Radical-9. When the dicoberine interacted with the radium and calcium, it produced a glowing blue substance. However, mixing in the lantrate caused a violent reaction, transforming it into a bubbling, multicolored liquid that attracted more lantrate. This reaction culminated in an explosion that blew off the divider's door, triggering alarms. Jay chastises Gregory for his reckless decision and rushes to ensure the safety of the children in the building. Mason was tasked with locking down the facility to contain the radiation, which, unlike the Apocalypse timeline, this is successful, and the Radical-9 contamination is limited to that of the Republic Plaza. Meanwhile, Gregory and David enter the lab to help Jack, who is severely burned and barely conscious. Once the radiation is contained, it is revealed that all present in the building, including the children, have been exposed to the Radical-9 compound. In the log dated 5 days after the Radical-9 incident, Jack Adata grapples with shock and turmoil following the explosion and its aftermath. Despite suffering severe burns and radiation poisoning, Jack's cells begin to heal rapidly due to the radiation. Yet he is tormented by the loss of his daughter, Megan, who died from the exposure. Grieving deeply, Jack is unable to confront his wife, Pamela. Obsessed with finding a way to resurrect Megan, Jack views her death as a grave mistake linked to the incident. He collaborates with fellow scientists to administer modified beta blockers to the children affected by the radiation, effectively erasing their memories of the traumatic event, and consequently of Megan. While his colleagues choose to remember the incident to avoid future disasters, Jack is solely focused on overcoming the failure that led to his daughter's demise. Feeling ostracized, and the burden of the experiment that caused his loss, Jack addresses the President in this newest log, vowing to pursue his mission relentlessly. He announces his intention to enter Phase 2 of the experiments, convinced that President Valhart's orders triggered the catastrophic events, and is determined to take drastic actions to bring Megan back, regardless of the potential consequences. On January 2, 2008, Jennifer Cress is born as Jennifer Adata, to Jack Adata and an unknown mother. On February 13th, 2008, Gavin Daniels witnesses another vision where he is seeing a tense conversation between his father, Gregory, and Jay Ryan in a park. Gregory expresses his deepening concern over Jack, whose powers have dramatically escalated, leading to increased anger and dangerous outbursts. Jay reveals his own troubling dreams, which are turning into foreboding premonitions. Jay urges Gregory to take Gavin and leave town for their safety. This, of course, being the 9-year-old Gavin and not the omniscient Gavin currently watching in on things here. Their conversation shifts as Gregory considers his family's precarious situation, aware of the threat that Jack poses. The vision then shifts, revealing Gavin's childhood home as Gregory prepares to leave for work, passing by a younger version of Gavin, peacefully sleeping. As Gregory steps out, he encounters Jack, who confronts him with an unsettling intensity. Jack accuses Gregory of having sent him into the dangerous situation, framing Greg as the problem that he needs to now eliminate. Jack asserts control over Gavin's life, threatening harm if Gregory refuses to comply with his demands. In a chilling power play, Jack forces Gregory to destroy his cell phone. The vision then culminates with Greg reluctantly backing away, conflicted by his love for his son, but his fear for his son's life. Up to this point, Gavin hadn't known the reason for his father's abandoning of him, so this is heartrending for him to experience. On February 15th, 2008, Jay, Jack, and David are grappling with the aftermath of Megan Adada, and this conversation takes place a year after the event. Jack, now visibly changed with a short haircut and a face marked by stress and anger, expresses frustration over the absence of Gregory and Mason, who have both gone to New York. David, now adopting a contemptuous tone, dismisses their departure as a sign of cowardice. It's important to note that even though David, Gregory, and Jay had been friends for numerous years, it is after this point when that friendship begins to fracture and David begins to align more under Jack's ideals. Jay, caught in the middle of this, nervously insists that their absence isn't a conspiracy, but just a response to the overwhelming guilt and pain caused by their previous actions. As Jack's anger intensifies, he reflects on his traumatic experience, blaming Greg and others for their negligence. David attempts to deflect responsibility by suggesting that it was all Gregory's fault as their leader that led to the problems. Jay acknowledges his part in the tragedy, but insists that he is here to atone for it. David, trying to ingratiate himself with Jack, claims that now Jay is in charge, they can proceed with their work without restraint. Jack, driven by a ruthless ambition, announces his intention to continue the testing, revealing his plan to involve his new daughter, Jennifer, and bring in a new colleague, Sal Moon, from the New York branch to assist them. Jay expresses concern over these plans, questioning the morality of testing on an infant. Jack, with manic smile, hints at a darker agenda, suggesting that if Sal does not align with their goals, they might have to eliminate him. The atmosphere grows increasingly dark as Jack's intentions become clear, leaving Gavin with a chilling sense of foreboding about the future of the scientists. On May 5th, 2008, Gavin Daniels now observes his father, Gregory, appearing disheveled and malnourished, several months after being threatened by Jack. Dressed in a black t-shirt and khaki shorts, Gregory is walking down a New York City sidewalk, seemingly lost and unnoticed by passerbys who dismiss him as a drug user. Gavin feels a surge of protectiveness and frustration, wishing he could intervene and change the narrative. Following his father, Gavin sees him approach a large building, perhaps the New York branch of the Prometheans he'd heard so much about. Gavin speculates about a potential reunion with his mother, Lorraine, who has a troubled history with Gregory. Greg enters the building like a zombie, struggling to maintain his composure. He approaches the front desk and urgently requests his ex-wife, signaling desperation as he leans heavily against the desk. Moments later, Lorraine arrives, shocked to see him in such a state. Their conversation is fraught with tension, which hints more at their past. Greg focuses on a matter of retrieving their son, and he dismisses their past grievances, emphasizing the immediate need for action. And Lorraine agrees to help, and the vision begins to shift. Weeks later, Gregory is shown to be in a better state, back in a suit and working diligently at a desk. He's joined by Samara Knight, a sharp professional woman, who expresses empathy for his loss, while suggesting they greet an unexpected visitor. Gregory, still consumed by the need to stop Jack, readily agrees. They navigate a cluttered office space to meet this guest, and revealing Mason Radica. Mason embraces Gregory, and their reunion quickly shifts to serious discussions about Jack's escalating danger. Mason informs Gregory that Jack has become more powerful and out of control, referencing his strange abilities, including telekinesis. They deduce that Jack's exposure to Radical-9 has amplified his powers, creating an even more dire situation. As the conversation unfolds, it becomes clear that Jack has been testing on the children with intention of transferring his power. The gravity of their situation deepens as they contemplate the potential for Jack to project his consciousness onto an heir, potentially taking over their bodies. Lorraine's horror becomes palpable as she begins to process the implications. The group discusses their urgent need to devise a plan to stop Jack without triggering a catastrophic reaction, which could result in explosive consequences due to the Radical-9 system. And from what we know in the Apocalypse timeline, anyone with Radical-9 in their system exploding would be very not good. On October 27, 2008, Jake Carraway is born in Aurora, Colorado. On November 13, 2009, Matthew Avery is born to Oliver Avery and an unknown mother in the United Kingdom. On June 28, 2011, Samuel Adata is born to Jack Adata and an unknown mother. On June 18, 2012, Sarah Newman is born to Jack Adata and Tracy Newman in Denver, Colorado. On July 23, 2012, Iris McCallum is born in Queensbury, New York. On September 11, 2012, John Ryan is born to Jay and Karen Ryan in Denver, Colorado. Next, we have a vision experienced by Gavin that centers on President Hal Valhart in 2013. Valhart aimed to restore order in a country under British rule and held meetings to support the American people, drawing on his knowledge of pre-war American culture. Despite his efforts, the populace resented the authoritarian regime. And in 2013, Valhart was assassinated in a devastating explosion during a fundraising meeting for the urban poor, which also claimed the lives of his entire cabinet, including 2 grandsons of the Queen. It is rumored that a crazed individual, known only publicly by the moniker the Exploding Man, was responsible for this attack. In truth, though, it actually turns out that Mason Radica, having been overloaded with Radical-9 from his earlier exposure, stumbled into the president's quarter while they were discussing cutting off sections of the country in a bid to appease the Queen. Mason's actions, stemming from his struggles with Radical-9 poisoning, marked a significant turning point in the government's collapse and sparked widespread riots across the United States, leading to the destruction of major cities like Denver in 5 years' time. And this tragic event illustrates the chaotic aftermath of the terror of Radical-9. Next, we're moving to a memory that happens in August of 2013, where Gavin, posing as Nathan Dennings, is scoping through Brian Jackson's memory. He hesitates before knocking on a door, uncertain if anyone's home or if he'll be ignored. Just as he's about to knock, he feels a gun pressed against the back of his head, and is confronted by Brian Jackson. Brian accuses Gavin of not being who he claims, which, fair, and reveals he's been researching Nathan and his other associates. As Gavin tries to explain himself, Brian lowers his gun slightly, but remains wary. They enter Brian's home, where Gavin learns that Brian's been in witness protection after uncovering something about a dangerous virus related to the Prometheans. In an attempt to appeal to Brian's better nature, Gavin reveals that he possesses abilities that allowed him to appear at his home, as there seemed to be no other way to move forward with the conversation. The conversation then shifts to the year, and Gavin learns it's 2013, a critical year for the government, as with what happened with Mason, though Brian seems unaware of the impending collapse. Tensions then begin to escalate as Gavin tries to calm Brian, but Brian, in a panic, questions his presence and demands the return of his family. As Brian raises the shotgun in anger, Gavin makes a hasty retreat, hearing a gunshot but not looking back. He runs down the street, calling for help from Micah from back in the Apocalypse timeline, as dizziness overcomes him, and he ultimately collapses, returning back. On January 28, 2014, Gavin again finds himself having a vision of the Republic Plaza, observing a stark and unsettling scene centered around 4 metallic pods that resemble cocoons in the center of the lab. These pods are surrounded by machinery that appears to generate energy for the cocoon-like structures, with wires sprawling across the floor. Gavin notices Jack, Jay, and Sal Moon, the large man previously encountered in New York, suggesting that the transfer process involving Sal has been completed. Gavin doubts Sal's trustworthiness in this new environment. Jack's harsh voice cuts through the tension, demanding Sal to proceed without hesitation. Sal, looking worn and anxious, leads a small child, no older than 5, toward the leftmost pod, which ominously opens with a mechanical hiss. Inside, straps were designed to restrain someone, create an unsettling atmosphere. The young child, filled with innocent curiosity, gazes up at Sal, who struggles to suppress his own fear. Gavin's attention then shifts to the next pod, where a 15-year-old boy pounds against the glass, tears streaming down his face. Despite his turmoil, Sal straps the young boy into the pod, shutting the door behind him with a heavy heart. He retreats to the barrier, visibly shaken and grasping for breath. As Jack orders Jay to bring him the 2 infants, Gavin feels an urgent need to intervene. Jay, looking utterly defeated, carefully places the first child, Sarah Newman, into a pod, sealing it shut, before doing the same with the second, his own son, John Ryan. The weight of the situation hangs heavily as Jay walks back, appearing utterly drained. With a chilling command, Jack initiates the process. Radical-9 exposure, number 2. The pods begin to glow ominously, their surfaces shimmering with a neon light as they fill with the deadly substance. The mechanical sounds intensify, and Gavin watches in horror as the pods begin to fog up. The atmosphere grows increasingly tense, until suddenly, the air is pierced by the screams emanating from the leftmost pods, those containing the 2 siblings. Their pods begin letting out steam, smoke, and then Gavin hears a small, but confined boom. The 2 windows get sprayed with a dark red liquid, blood. Sal begins losing it as it's revealed they are his 2 children, Jet and Jason. Test 2 is a slight failure, recommencing the test for those that survived. Are there any objections, Jay? Jack's voice asks calmly. Jay turns his head to Jack, his eyes still wide. You know, I could easily just kill your boy here and move on with Sarah. It makes no difference to me. Your boy lives because you've stayed by my side. No objection, sir, Jay said weakly. Great, we go in again. Early in 2014, the perspective shifts to Jen Cress, who experiences a vision of her past as a 6-year-old in the vibrant lobby of the Republic Plaza, contrasting sharply with the current state of its wreckage. She sees herself in a cheerful yellow dress alongside a younger Jay, who appears less burdened than the adult he becomes. We see a scene where Jay confronts Jack, and Jack's unsettlingly gentle demeanor belies his menacing words, as he dismisses Jay's concerns about their unethical testing, and hints at plans involving Jen. Jay, filled with anger and concern, questions Jack's humanity, but Jack asserts his authority and intent to continue on the experiments. This only gets worse when David enters, providing updates on the experiments involving the Radical-9. Jay's emotional involvement leads to a reassignment order, complicating the situation. As David prepares to take Jen for testing, Jay feels helpless and sends a cryptic text before a massive explosion rocks the building, causing chaos. Amidst the smoke and destruction, Gregory Daniels appears. He and Jay spring into action, racing to rescue Jennifer from the experiment lab. As they ascend through the hazardous environment, explosions rattle the structure, and Jen feels a mixture of fear and urgency. Just as they attempt to escape, David confronts them, brandishing a pistol, demanding they back off. Tempers flare, and David questions Jay and Gregory's motives, accusing them of terrorism, which, fair. Greg retorts, and there's no time for this, leading to the violent confrontation where Jay ends up striking David, forcing him to drop the gun. Greg, are you okay? Dave? Jay called from the bottom of the stairwell. I'm here, Greg said. I've got Jennifer. Greg, what happened? He had a gun pointed at me, so I had to de-escalate. How the fuck did you do that? Think I'm starting to get powers like Jack. Jay looked at him concerned. Another time. We'll have to talk about this another time. We need to get out of here now. You take Jennifer and get out of here as fast as you can. We'll get numbnuts over here to safety. Taking this place down if it's the last thing I do. How do you expect to do that? Greg asked. You have one more explosive, do you not? I'm gonna set that up with its weakest here and hightail it out here with Dave. He may be dumb, but he still has a family. We need to get her out of here, stat. I only brought with one car. How are you gonna get out? I'll figure it out. I'll find a way to meet up with you. Who knows? Maybe with some distance, Jack will maybe come to his senses, Jay said. I think you're putting too much hope into this. Forgive me, but I don't want to lose one of my best friends, Jay said. Okay, I don't either. Just be careful, alright? You too. Out front was a shoddy-looking baby food green-colored car. It was very small, and Greg opened the back door, pushing for Jen's younger self to sit in. Where's my dad? I asked, finally done with the crying. Dad's out for the time being. Things are okay, though. Things are gonna be okay, Gregory said. Okay, where's Gavi? I asked. Gregory made no answer. Is Gavi okay? I asked. As okay as any, Gregory said, starting the engine and turning around to me. Sure would love to see him. It's gonna be his 15th birthday soon. Definitely want his best buddy there to celebrate with him, Greg said. Yay! I say, a hesitant sort of sound coming from my mouth. I couldn't tell if it was more excited or scared, probably an even split of both. A final explosion ripped through the Republic Plaza, and Greg held his breath. Be safe, Jay, Greg whispered. Who's attacking us? I asked, starting to cry again. No one. It's fine, Greg said. He must have known that was the least helpful thing he could have said in that moment. He pulls into the street and begins driving. As they get out on the highway, a car appears in the back window. It lurches down, this time spins itself sideways before it launches up like a tiger. It leapt across the highway like it were alive. It came to stop right in front of our car. We smashed into the rear. It sent us off the side as the front of the car bent up like a tin can. Greg's head slammed into the steering wheel as we collided with the other car. My younger self was propelled forward, but the seatbelt kept me back and having from any serious head trauma. A familiar smell of burning rubber and smoke began to pervade the area. The other car was unfazed by the collision, which shouldn't have been possible. The driver's side door opened and out stepped my father. I could see he's in the passenger seat with a middle-aged woman who was dead from a gunshot wound. My father wrapped his hands on the steering wheel as if this were some everyday Sunday occurrence. Lorraine. Now, you just had to get involved. You just couldn't stay put in New York, and now look at you. Bullet in the brain. Couldn't even say goodbye to your... What were you two now? Separated? Divorced? He tutted and turned to the corpse. Doesn't matter now. Whatever will your son think of you when you do such stupid things? How could you not tell me you and Greg were coming to visit? He waited. Oh, what a shame indeed. And now look what you forced me to do. Kill a mother. And now I have to go kill a father. I hope this is worth orphaning your son. He bent over and kissed her cheek. Then the car erupted in flames as he stepped out. It repelled from his body as if he had a protective shield around him. I turned back to our car. I saw the window on the driver's side shatter, and Greg's leg popped through. He must have awoken. He crawled through the window and stumbled over the back of the car and thrust his elbow into it. My father removed a large revolver from underneath his coat and leisurely strolled over to the struggling Gregory. I looked toward him. Turn around. He's got a gun. I hoped that somehow, some way, he'd be able to hear me, change his fate. Jack got closer as Greg managed to break through the window, and he pressed the muzzle of the gun against the back of Greg's head. He cocks it and then smiles a devilish grin. Hi, Greg. He pulled the trigger, and his brains exploded all over the car, all over my younger self. The gunshot rings out, and I remember it as the loud explosion I heard. Greg's body fell, and his neck caught in the window, leaving his bloodied head in full view for me to see. Jack holstered the gun and shook his head. I felt my body lift for the second time in one day. He lifted me out of the car without lifting a finger, held me out in front of him. I was a crying mess. He stared at me and forced the tears to stop. I remember a vague, terrified feeling that came along with that. He crossed his arms as if he were waiting for something. That something must have been the police, as when the sirens in the distance began to sound. He cracked a smile and uncrossed his arms. In the distance, I saw the flashing red and blue lights. Now, shortly after this event, we see the results of what happened with David as he returns home, and Gavin returns to witness the scene. I'm falling through the void. Then, I'm lying on a wet patch of grass and dirt. A front lawn, perhaps. I sit up, coughing slightly as my vision refocuses. A large white house sits in front of me. My attention is immediately grabbed when I hear a loud crash coming from inside the house. I rush to my feet and scramble up to the door. There's another crash and I grab down at the handle. I open up the door and run inside the house. I'm looking at two figures facing each other in a cluttered living room. A nearby lamp has fallen over and broken, and I believe it to be the cause of the crash. One of the figures, the one with his back towards me, takes a step forward.
We aren't going anywhere, Elena. I have a lot of work to get back to.
The voice said. I feel like I've heard it before, and then I realize it belongs to David, Andrew's father. Dave, you need to think rationally about this. Our son is watching, Elena said, her voice tinged with fear. She's got beautiful short black hair and bright green eyes. Behind her I see the young child from my first vision with him. Andrew, who can't be much older than 5 years old. His black hair and glowing green eyes just like his mother. He watches the confrontation with interest, but little understanding. I can guess they can't see me, otherwise I would have been acknowledged by now. Why is it only sometimes they can see me?
I'm continuing on in my work, and that's final!
That virus of yours is going to kill this world, David, Elena said.
It's not a virus! It's a cure! It's the cure!
he said, grabbing her arm. She wails slightly.
This work is what keeps you fed and under this roof. And as long as you live under this roof, you will listen to me,
he said, deadly serious. Unhand me, Elena says as she yanks her arm downward, freeing herself from his grip. David reaches into his coat pocket and pulls out a revolver. He aims it at Elena, and I can see her face widen in fear. Without any extra thought, I'm running towards David and I jump to tackle him to the ground. I'm surprised when I fly right through and land on the ground between them. I look behind me and I see David's hardened face. It's dirty, there's a wild look in his eyes, his arms shaking almost as much as I'd seen Mason's. I look in front of me and I swing my arms out to try to grab Elena's leg to pull her out of harm's way, but my hands phase through her as well. David, what are you doing? Andrew is watching! Please don't do this! Elena said, bursting in tears. I look back at Andrew and his eyes are wide, but he stands there like a statue. David, please say something. Please put the gun down. I look back towards David, and it looks like his eyes are bugging out. I see his hand shaking. Elena takes a slow step toward him. He looks up frantically and then nearly jumps backward.
Stay away!
David, I can help you. You just need to put down the gun.
I said stay back! All this didn't have to be this way!
Elena takes a slowed step forward once more. In one fell swoop, I see David raise the gun. He raises it and points it at his own head. I see his eyes are watering, and he shakes his head. In another moment, his brains fly across the room in a splattered array of mess. I hear Elena scream as David's body falls to the floor. The gun falls out of his hand and it clangs to the ground. The colors around me begin to drain as I see Elena running up to David and cradling him in her arms, crying. My head hits the floor and I'm back to darkness. Okay, and now with this, the backstory is now largely complete. From this point on, we're going to be tackling the events on the front side of the plot, beginning with the second Radical-9 Saga book, Telos. We've been looking at a lot of the end of that story from Gavin's point of view, but let's meet up with Gavin Daniels when he enters the story proper in 2018. June 28, 2018. The story shifts to Athens, Ohio, introducing Gavin Daniels, a college-aged young man grappling with cynicism and a shattered focus. He often converses with a supposed imaginary friend, reflecting on his struggles for survival in a town that's deteriorated significantly. Gavin reveals he previously attended Ohio University, which was shut down after the catastrophic explosion in the chemistry building that caused a radiation leak. This disaster transformed some of the students into feral beings he refers to as vultures, who resort to cannibalism in their desperation. Despite the dangers posed by the vultures, Gavin decides to return to campus, hoping to scavenge some food and supplies from the abandoned college. As the air is mostly cleared since the incident. As he approaches the campus, he is spotted by a vulture, forcing him to sprint for safety into a storm. He manages to enter just in time, slamming the door shut and leaning against it to catch his breath. Once inside, Gavin makes his way to his room on the second floor, where he stocks his backpack with food and water from his old supplies. Nostalgic for his past life, he decides to take a warm shower. However, this moment of respite is interrupted by sound of an elevator, which unnerves him, since he thought the building was deserted. Fearing for his safety, he prepares for the worst as footsteps approach his shower stall. Suddenly, the curtain is pulled back, revealing a girl holding a gun, Addison Thompson, a fellow student and former member of the dance and softball teams. Gavin recalls an embarrassing encounter with her during a party in the dorm's laundry room. Addison is a bit flustered, admitting she's never used a gun before and struggles to maintain eye contact. As Gavin dresses, they both question each other about their reasons for being in the dorm. Addison reveals that she's been holed up in her room, only venturing out once to obtain the gun and stock up on supplies, intending to stay hidden from the chaos outside. Their reunion marks the beginning of a slightly small, unexpected alliance in their fight for survival. Gavin then confronts Addison about her choice to hide from the dangers of their post-apocalyptic world. He accuses her of being a coward, insisting he's merely restocking up on supplies rather than hiding. Addison counters that he's doing the same exact thing, but then opens up about her struggles, revealing her troubled past. Gavin's perception of her as a privileged student shatters as she explains that her parents took on significant debt to send her to college in the first place, and they died during the chaos following the government collapse. Overwhelmed by fear and grief, she had chosen to isolate herself rather than face the reality of burying her parents. Gavin, jaded and distrustful, dismisses her struggles, feeling that at least she had parental love, while he was abandoned and forced to fend for himself. He prides himself on never compromising on his values, yet his bitterness paints him as a deeply damaged individual. Addison argues that survival can take many forms, prompting Gavin to reluctantly acknowledge her perspective. She apologizes for pointing the gun at him, explaining her loneliness, and invites him to join her in her dorm room, if he's willing to lower his own standards just the once. Contemplating her offer, Gavin decides to accept, motivated partly by his attraction to her. He gathers his belongings and heads to the 4th floor, reflecting on how this is his first time venturing above his own floor, since most of his acquaintances were either gone or dead. Upon entering Addison's room, he notices its similarities to his own, though it was filled with a considerable hoard of supplies. Addison lies on her bed, attempting to watch a World War II documentary on a TV powered by a remote battery, managing to connect to remnants of the internet. Their light-hearted exchange is interrupted by the ominous sound of the elevator dinging, causing tension as Gavin realizes his earlier actions of unlocking the dorm may have jeopardized their safety. Addison, alarmed, readies her gun, blaming Gavin for the potential danger. As they brace for the worst, the door suddenly bursts open, revealing a cloaked figure in a heavy gas mask. Addison warns the figure to remove its mask, but before she can react further, the figure lunges at her with lightning speed. Everything moves so fast, and Gavin hears a fire round off. When Gavin's brain begins working again, he sees the close figure close up against Addison, then pushes her off. Slimy intestines stay with the figure. He'd stabbed some sort of jagged blade into her stomach, which cut all various internal organs before ripping him out. The figure looks to Gavin and then says, "Sure you didn't have the guts to shoot me," in a cold and mechanical voice, most likely altered by a voice changer. Gavin steps back, not having a plan, and the only weapon is on the other side of this crazed lunatic. The figure grabs a small square cartridge from the innards of their cloak and presses a button on it, emitting a white smoke that quickly fills the room. The mask they wear must double as a gas mask as they stand with no change, as Gavin begins to feel lightheaded. His body crumples to the floor, numb, yet he can still keep conscious with the last of his strength. The figure grabs him and begins dragging him across the ground. All I can see is the small television monitor Addison had propped up. The documentary had managed to load, and on it playing were the last word Gavin hears before he slips under. And on that cold day in January 1945, Great Britain became the world's strongest superpower. Gavin awakens in a disorienting situation, surrounded by unfamiliar voices and a full-on sense of discomfort. He opens his eyes to find himself in a perfectly square room made of polished wood with two strangers, a hipster-looking man in his 20s named Tom, and a larger teenage girl named Grace. His body aches, and he's immediately frustrated by circumstances, questioning what will happen to him now that he's conscious. Gavin quickly learns that Tom and Grace had woken up before him, and were having their own discussions about the bizarre situation they found themselves in. Both are just as confused about Gavin as they ended up in the room with why they are together. Tom admits he rummaged through Gavin's backpack for anything that could aid their escape, which angers Gavin, as he feels his privacy has been violated. Despite his irritation, Gavin tries to gather information. Tom introduces himself, having found Gavin's name on a piece of paper on the backpack. Grace apologizes for Tom's behavior, but Gavin brushes off her attempt at politeness, his mind rushing back to the masked figure that had attacked Addison before he was knocked out. The mention of the shrouded figure resonates with Tom and Grace, who reveal that they too had seen something similar before they lost consciousness. Just then, there's a sound surrounding the three. An intercom plays out, and a mechanical voice speaks out. "Hello, I assume you've had a nice nap. I am your captain, Leto." Leto, the masked figure, is a reference twofold. One, to the mother of Zeus, Apollo, and Artemis of Greek mythology, and also to Jared Leto, because while nowadays he's a bit of a nutcase with a cult and literally everything associated with that, the 30 Seconds to Mars self-titled album is the unofficial soundtrack for this novel. It is that good. Anyway, Leto informs them that they've been injected with a drug called tubocurarine. A real drug named tubocurarine chloride is often referred to as an arrow poison for use in hunting, but it's vastly been outdated by new and improved drugs. Its main feature is as a skeletal muscle relaxant, and in the context of this game Leto has arranged, it'll cease the injectee's circulatory system within 18 hours, and they shall die a very painless death. The goal of the game, and obviously this is where Talos' other major inspiration comes from, please play 9 Hours, 9 Persons, 9 Doors, and its sequel Virtue's Last Reward, because these two games are amazing. The goal of the game is to find the cure of the tubocurarine within the area that Leto had constructed, and this cure is called Excelavine, reference to the cure to Radical-9 in Virtue's Last Reward, Excelavir. Now, Accelavir is a fictional drug created for that game, and its equivalent in reference, Accelavine, is similar to a real-life drug that is used to counteract the real-life tubocurarine cholinesterase inhibitor. In Zero Escape, this drug is called neostigmine. Now, a quick diagram to help people keep up. In Zero Escape, Radical-6 is a fictional virus. This virus slows down the brain's processing speed by 1 Radical-6 and causes an increase in suicidal tendencies. Accelavir is a fictional drug that is the cure for Radical-6. In universe, it is created long after the Radical-6 outbreak, so it is unable to save the lives that have been taken due to that virus. Tubocurarine is a real drug. It is a muscle relaxant and will cause the heart to stop pumping blood over time of its injection. And neostigmine is a fictional drug based on a real drug. It is the cure to tubocurarine if injected into the bloodstream. Now, in the Radical-9 saga, Radical-9, fictional chemical compound based on the fictional virus Radical-6, is the combination of radium, dicobarine, calcium, and lantrate to create mutagenic cells within humans. It causes cellular augmentation and insight/foresight. If the human body has too much Radical-9 in its system, it begins to overload and will eventually cause a nuclear explosion. Tubocurarine, real drug, same as in real life and Zero Escape. Accelavine, fictional drug named after another fictional drug, but based on a real drug. Complicated, I know, but it's based on a cholinesterase inhibitor with a name inspired by the Accelavir. Got it? Got it. Leto warned the group to stay alert, suggesting they might not be alone in the playground. As soon as the intercom cuts off, a previously sealed door opens, revealing an exit. Grace hesitates, fearing a trap, but Gavin sarcastically insists he'd rather leave than stay in the room. They begin to venture out, and Tom mentions that the drug tubocurarine, which Leto referred to, is dangerous. Gavin dismissively expresses his disdain for med students, seeing them as pretentious. They enter a large party lounge, where Gavin notices a piece of paper inside a grandfather clock and takes it, though he considers it unimportant. The group speculates about the bizarre situation that they're in, pondering if it's a psychological experiment or some twisted show, and Gavin remarks that the perpetrators must be wealthy to avoid legal consequences. They move through a metal door in the parlor room, which features coffee chairs, tables, and another metal door. Gavin spots another scrap of paper with 0399 written on it, which suggests as a potential password for the safe nearby. Tom inputs it successfully, and they find another piece of paper inside, prompting discussion about the significance of the documents. Now, these are the Year Zero journal documents that we discussed earlier that let us in on some of the past of the Radical-9 experiments. Continuing on through the next door, they enter an infirmary and encounter a naked girl with long blonde hair lying face down. Gavin nervously hopes she's either dead or attractive. When she suddenly sits up, he's stunned, noting her appearance. She approaches him silently, pressing a finger to his forehead, and he experiences a sudden, overwhelming pain, causing his mind to go blank. This is where he has one of the visions that give us more context into the Radical-9 experiment that we've gone over previously. The vision ends, and some of the pieces start sticking in Gavin's mind, but he doesn't know why. He doesn't ever remember being part of this nonsense. Doesn't remember being with these kids in Denver, but then again, trying to remember that age is a blur to him, so maybe it was possible. In the second that happens, after, the girl dashes off the long hallway back of the infirmary. Tom and Grace check to see if Gavin's okay, as only a few moments have passed for them. Gavin shakes off the effects of his previous encounter and rushes after the girl, eager to understand what just happened. As he runs through the hallway, he hears a loud crash behind him, but doesn't look back, fearing the girl will escape. He encounters a gap in the hallway, crossed only by a precarious catwalk supported by 4 ropes, with the chasm below seemingly endless. He carefully makes his way across, nearly faltering as the catwalk threatens to snap, but ultimately he makes it to the other side. He arrives at a locked metal door, hearing banging from the other side. Deciding to wheel a nearby bar as a weapon, he opens the door, ready to strike, only to find Tom on the other end. Tom explains that they've been stuck in the same room since Gavin ran off, leading Gavin to realize he's back in the infirmary, now blocked by a large gate, presumably the source of the crashing sound he heard earlier. Grace suggests they backtrack, but Gavin points out that there's no clear path. Tom proposes they check for anything they may have missed. Reluctantly, Gavin agrees, suggesting they go down the chasm. Grace argues against it, insisting it's a bad idea, but in her distraction she trips and crashes onto the catwalk, causing a rope to snap. The 3 of them plummet into the chasm as Gavin screams, feeling that familiar pain as he loses consciousness to another vision. When he awakens, he finds himself in a flooded warehouse beneath the ship, a hole in the hull from above where he must have fallen. Though he's alive, he feels immense pain, suspecting a dislocated shoulder. The warehouse is empty except for him, with the only one acceptable door on a raised platform while the others are blocked. Frustrated with Tom and Grace for abandoning him, he rises and checks his backpack, discovering that his water bottles had burst during the fall, soaking everything inside except for a box containing very personal papers. These papers are medical records from his childhood in the orphanage in which he was raised after all of the events previously, where he avoided looking at to deny their existence and deny their control over him. Realizing he might die in this desolate place, he steels himself and opens the box, ready to confront his past. It is revealed that Gavin has dementia with Lewy bodies, often referred to as Parkinson's disease dementia. It's a hard pill to swallow, but it explains a lot. Gavin runs up the ramp and through the door. He enters an empty parking garage, empty except for Grace on the ground, blood pouring from a minor wound at her side. She calls to him when she sees him, meaning she was still alive. He runs over and says she caught up to the girl, but she had a gun and managed to shoot her. Gavin nods and runs off, ignoring her calls for help. Bitch abandoned me to die in the water back there, he thinks. The ramp down leads to an identical-looking garage. It isn't until the third floor down where something changes. There's a door with labeled Danger Room, but the cries of Grace no longer echoing down the halls, whether it be by her passing out, dying, or him being too far away. It floats off of his mind. He knows he should have helped her, but every second he wastes not finding this girl is another second they're all trapped in this place. For all he knows, maybe she knows something about this. He reaches for the handle to the door, but it opens before he can grab it, and a body falls onto him, knocking him over. It's Tom, but he's got no time for pleasantries. He's rushing up faster than Gavin can ever see to slam the door shut. "The hell, dude? What's in there?" Tom says, and he stepped in for a second, following the girl to only find out she had a gun. She began to shoot at him, hence his appearance now. Gavin asks him why the hell he left him there all alone, to which Tom says that he left the both of them temporarily, if he could find the girl and try to subdue her and regroup, since both Grace and Gavin were unconscious. He tried to wake them up, but they were out cold. Grace had said she woke up to see the girl. Would that mean that she looped back around to the warehouse? Why would she do that? Tom asks if he's seen Grace around, that if Gavin woke up alone, then she must be awake somewhere, so they can regroup and try to find their way out. Gavin lies and says that he hasn't, so maybe she was further down. Tom agrees, saying that if they lock the door he came out of, then the girl will be stuck in there, if it doesn't lead outward anymore. Gavin questions him locking it, but doesn't object. It's not like they're going to find Grace downstairs, as she's currently 3 floors above them. It's not that Gavin necessarily wants her dead, it's more so there's a pretty big chance that either Tom or Grace are responsible for him being here. One of them is lying, and is Leto. Either that, or it's the girl, but that doesn't exclude the possibility that Tom or Grace could be in on it. And Gavin needs Tom at the moment to help him read his medical record to make sense of his prognosis. If it turns out that Tom is the one, well, he'll try to deal accordingly. Gavin brings up the note to Tom, and asks him if he can make any sense of it, saying that he knew Tom earlier to figure out his name. Tom takes the note in hand and studies it, asking if Gavin really knows where Grace went, saying he's not too good of a liar. Gavin grunts and tells him his suspicions of her. He makes the point that he didn't shoot her, but he is willing to leave her if she might be connected to this. Tom thinks about this and begins walking back up, saying the only way Gavin will get his answers is if he follows and makes a do-it apology. Gavin struggles with the choice, but he comes to the conclusion that more than anything he wants answers. Even if it comes back grim, he just wants the answers. Why was he kidnapped? How long does he have to live? Why him? Why did his parents leave? So many questions and so little to be answered. Gavin throws a fit of rage before following Tom back through the ramp. Up near Grace, Tom helps her out, asking for some of the spare clothes he has in his bag. He uses a shirt to keep pressure on the wound, and notices that based on the entry point, the bullet must have been really small, and with how it entered, he assumes it shouldn't be fatal as long as they keep it wrapped. And Tom says if they're going to continue, she's going to need to rest a moment to get her strength back. That means they have some time to unwrap some of the tension they've got going on. Gavin groans and says he just wants to get out. Tom says they all do, and like it or not, they were brought here together and have the best chance of leaving if they stay together. Gavin says he doesn't like him or Grace. I'm sorry for the bluntness of it, but not for saying it. It's just how I feel. Tom says he isn't asking Gavin to like him, but he's asking him to set that aside so they can all get out of this place alive. Gavin doesn't have a retort to this, but apologizes for leaving Grace to die. She says it's a start, but begins to sit herself up. The bleeding seems to have largely been held back by the shirt, and Gavin thinks it could start again soon if it's not treated. He says he wants to know if they have any idea of why they were grabbed. He reveals that his dad was mentioned in the logs that they have been finding, but that he has no recollection of back then. Tom adds in that he's glad that Gavin shared because he also felt a connection to one of the names in the logs, but he was scared that if he was found out, he'd be suspected as being a part of it. Grace asks him what he means, and Tom says that Mason Radica is his Uncle Mason, which means that Kate is his cousin. Gavin then turns to Grace and asks her who she's related to, since that seems to be the common thread of everything, but she shrugs it off, saying her family's buried underground. She had a brother in college who loved to write, and a dad who was a nutjob reporter for a business startup that never really went anywhere. Gavin asks for sure if she doesn't have any Uncle Jays or Davids around, which she says she doesn't, which, of course, knowing what we know now, it's clear that her father, being Brian Jackson, is why she is here. Tom also says that he owes Gavin one prognosis, and Gavin's legitimately surprised he's keeping his word. Tom says he doesn't think Gavin deserves it for how he's acted, but if it'll keep him motivated to work as a team, then he'll read it. Gavin says this is fair. Grace asks what he's talking about, and Tom says it'll be clear in a moment. He reads that Gavin's life expectancy is approximately 5 to 5.5 years, with 5 being the unfortunate low, and 5.5 being if the planets align and he prays to the good Lord. Gavin's heart sinks because he knows what Tom's going to say next. He tells Gavin that the record was dated for 2013. 5 years ago. He says the general prognosis for a condition like his is 5 to 10 years based on severity, and Gavin's case is severe. He takes this in, and another second is back to thinking about the escape. He says they should move along, and even helps usher Grace in the direction downward. Tom asks if he's okay. A hollow question, really, Gavin thinks. He's asking just to ask, not so much to get an answer, which Gavin's okay with, because he's not sure if the answer was worth it. But then he reminds himself that the answer was always worth it. He says now that survival wasn't a main priority, he can focus on the answers. He can use his energy to find the girl, find out why he's here, find out what happened to his parents, find out everything. The group continues onward, and finds that the only way they believe they're going to make any progress is through the room that Tom unlocked. They find that it is still locked, so the girl couldn't have gone out through that door. Tom unlocks it, and they head on through, making it to a pitch-black room. They decide to split up and each follow a straight line until they can find the source of light, as there must be in a generator room. Grace stumbles over what she says feels like a skull, based on the shape of cavities near the top. This freaks her out, and she begins to freak out even more. Gavin finds her in the darkness and she hands it to him, asking him to confirm what she thinks it is. He grabs for it, blind in the dark, but when he makes contact with it, an intense burning sensation runs over him. Images pass like a blur. He hears a high-pitched scream, and then it ends. The skull isn't mentioned any further, but this is the one that belonged to Maddie Gray, and this is the room where she died. He then wonders what the hell happened, and then a sound interrupts into the room. Tom says he found a switch for the lights. They do in fact turn on, but that's what worries Gavin. An extreme heat. Gavin then realizes that it's wrong. This isn't a generator room. The sign on the outside was barely legible, but it said danger, incinerator room. Gavin yells at them to run out of the room as quickly as they can, and as soon as Grace and Tom discover their whereabouts, right in the center of several jets that seem to be warming themselves up, they follow his command. Through the other side of the room is a single door, the only one besides the one they came through. The girl must have gone through here, Gavin thinks, unless of course the girl had been hiding in the dark and managed to sneak back out into the parking garage. But he has to keep that thought in the back of his mind. His priority is moving forward and finding her forward. He has to trust that she's up ahead. And besides, with this room, he's about to become a furnace. There's no chance he's going to go back if his fears are correct. Gavin and his companions are trapped in a perilous situation as they face the intense heat radiating from the metal door behind them. With the sound of the jets whirring ominously, Gavin decides to retreat to avoid being burned. Ahead of him lies an elevator shaft, empty and daunting, revealing a long drop that suggests they are high up in an unknown location. Peering down, Gavin spots another opening on a lower floor, realizing that a daring jump off the cables might be their only way forward. Tom, sensing Gavin's plan, firmly refuses to jump, a sentiment echoed by Grace. But with the incinerator behind them, Gavin feels the urgency of their situation. He volunteers to go first, driven by a mix of bravery and dark curiosity, hoping the answers lie whatever beyond. Taking a deep breath, he launches himself toward the cable in the center, successfully grabbing on and swinging down. With a surge of adrenaline, he pulls himself onto the ledge, surprised at his own ability. Inspired by Gavin's success, but spurred by the fear of the flames, Tom steels himself for his own jump. As he runs and leaps, he manages to grab the cable, but a horrifying crack echoes through the air as the elevator crashes down on him, killing him instantly. Gavin, stunned, doesn't even hear the impact. The elevator halts just above him, its door opening to reveal the naked girl inside. She appears unfazed, holding a card on a black marker. After a moment, she hands the card to Gavin. Flabbergasted, he opens it to find a grotesque "Get well soon" message, with a teddy bear drawn on the front and one eye crossed out. Inside it reads, "I'm so sorry for your loss. I hope Thomas feels better soon." Realization hits him hard. Leto had orchestrated Tom's death as part of some twisted plan. Overcome by nausea, Gavin's stomach heaves as he finally hears Grace calling to him in the background. Determined to confront the girl whom he believes to be Leto, Gavin rushes down the hallway after her. When he finally catches up, he tackles her to the ground, asserting her she's not going anywhere till he gets his answers. To his relief, she silently nods when he asks if she's Leto. Signally, she has finally found someone who can provide the answers he desperately seeks through many questions remain. He asks her why he was taken, and what she plans to do next. She is silent. Again he asks her, this time pinning her arms down beside her. If this were any other context, it might have seemed as he were forcing himself on her. Not now. He's come too far for answers, and he's just not going to let her run away. He asks a final time, nearly screaming his question, but then she manages to get an arm free out from under him. He expects her to try to push him off her, but she does something else. She jabs her finger into her own eye socket, soundlessly screaming into the void, as a similar-looking white liquid from before begins bleeding out of her eye. Gavin instinctively backs off, but before he knows it, she dabs him with it across the forehead again. She whispers in a mechanical voice Gavin come to know as Leto. "Hero." Gavin's eyes begin to burn, and the world around him burns away until he sees the children from the previous visions. He watches a younger boy with pitch black hair, Andrew Cress, chewing a big wad of gum in his mouth near the two of the other kids, Gavin himself and the other little blonde girl, the one who would later die from the Radical-9 exposure, Megan Adada. He notices she has bright blonde hair that looks a hell of a lot like Leto's, but it should be impossible for Leto to be Megan. She was dead. Gavin realizes that Leto had gotten out from underneath him while he was out of it. She must have gone on ahead, Gavin thinks. He tries to follow until he hears gunshots. He sees Leto on the floor, with Grace standing over her with the BB gun in her hands. Gavin scolds her for shooting their only method for answers, but ultimately decides to move forward. They find their way back to the elevator and use it to find their way up to the roof, what is revealed to be the Republic Plaza, the very building in which the Radical-9 was discovered. Grace begins to succumb to the tubocurine in her system, and Gavin can feel the traces of symptoms in his sanity begins to fade when he hallucinates both Megan and Leto, her as a kid and the naked girl calling him her hero. It gets to be too much for him, and without a second step, he takes a step off the building before passing out. It is at this time where his consciousness is dragged to the Apocalypse timeline as his body explodes in the Radical-9 in his system, and Denver is leveled. In his exploits in the Apocalypse timeline, he then meets up with Micah, and the rest of the events that play out at the end of the Apocalypse timeline happen. And there is a final confrontation with Jack Adada. Jay points behind me. I turn quickly and then I see it too. It looks to be a rip in time itself. Coming right through is an arm I can recognize by the long blue sleeve with the golden filigree. "What is that?" Mason asked. I don't even get a chance to explain as the arm grabs my neck. I feel an intense burning sensation as his hand makes contact. I scream out and I'm yanked through the rift in time. The next thing I see is I'm being thrown against Icarus. I crash hard against the hard metal, and I look up to see Jack standing before me, stationed in the pit of Icarus. "Well, seems like you had a nice reunion," Jack said. I can still feel my neck burning from where he grabbed me. "Just what did he do?" "What, cat got your tongue?" Jack asked. I tried to speak, tried to move, to do anything, but I lost all feeling in my body. "Well, it seems like you've made my job all the easier. You weren't supposed to talk to them. You were supposed to let the stupid girl die," Jack said. He walks closer to me, but then he stops. I see a weird look on his face. It turns to one of curiosity, but it doesn't stay for long, and in the next moment his face turns to one of surprise. He steps forward quickly, but then everything I see went dark. I open my eyes and I am in the space between dimensions. In another second I see Jack's arm once more and I try to swim away from it. I locate another dimension in the distance and propel myself toward it. Right when I'm about to make contact, I feel a hardened grip on my leg. It's the one that got burned, so I wince a little as it tightens. I stretch out and grab hold of a new time and yank myself through. I tumble through and land against the wall. I hear some screaming as I see Jack tumbling in after me. I notice to look around and see I'm outside of Andrew's house. What did you do to me? I ask, finally getting my voice back. Jack gets to his feet slowly, obviously dazed. You jumped, he said, looking up at me. As he does, his face curves into one of shock. You kept your body. How did that? I don't let him finish. I'm running at him and I catch him off guard, sending him off his feet. I've got to find something to protect myself with, anything at all. I look around me and I can't see anything in the reach that will help. Jack gets to his feet and I see an angry look fill up his face. Why, you little, you're just as annoying as your pesky father, he said. He then brings his right arm up and I see something begin to form in it. It's some sort of purple mess of goo. It looks sort of like some sort of plasma. It begins dripping out of his hands onto the ground below him and it starts burning the grass around him. Jack takes a step forward and then throws the plasma glob. It hurtles right toward me and instinctively I raise my hands up in front of it. The plasma coats my hands, but then the strangest thing happens. It doesn't burn or anything, but instead begins to wrap around my hand and arm like a double helix. It dances around my fingertips and I feel I can will it in my own mind. What the hell now? Jack screams. I'm just as surprised as you are, I said, my eyes not leaving the formed substance. Must have been when I grabbed you, Jack said, more to himself than me. Maybe. Is it possible he'd given me these powers by accident? It's plausible he accidentally did the same thing to me as he did to my future self. That could mean I already have my ticket out of here. I just have to survive this fight. Just how dangerous is this stuff right here? I asked, walking closer to Jack. You don't know the power of which you deal with, Jack said, backing up a step. Oh, how the mighty act, I start. I can see Jack's eyes moving from my hand to my face. Now, do you want to do this the hard way or the easy way? I ask. Jack is silent for a second and then a wicked grin appears. In a matter of moments, Jack whips his arm up and I'm lifted into the air. I half expected the telekinesis to come in at some point, but it still is just as restricting as last time. I cannot move my body at all. Maybe I don't have to move my body. I breathe slowly and concentrate on the plasma covering my arms. In another moment, the plasma begins to shift and change. It begins to bubble, and in the next moment I see it hop off of my arm. It heads straight for Jack, scalding the side of his head. I hear him yell and I'm dropped to the ground. I look at him and I see that a nearly third of his face has been burnt by the bubbling plasma. You son of a bitch! In a matter of seconds, Jack has closed the distance between us and he shoves me to the ground. I feel the wind get knocked out of me, and the whole world around us changes in a flash. 1 second we're outside of Andrew's house, and now on top of the Republic Plaza building. Jack looks around himself, confused, and I take the opportunity to kick him off of me. He catches himself in midair and is now hovering a foot off the ground. You can float now? I ask. Jack doesn't answer. He immediately rushes in and picks me up. We're rising up, higher and higher. The rooftop of the Republic Plaza begins to shrink to the size of a raisin. We continue to rise up, but then I feel something different, as if everything just fell into place. My beacons of reality, they're all doomed if I can't get out of this, which is why I will get out of this. I can get out of this whenever I need to. I have the power. Concentrate, and then I close my eyes. My heart begins to slow, and I feel the air around us change. I open my eyes, and we're standing back in my college dorm room. Jack falls backwards onto my bed, and I look around quickly. I reach for my roommate's neck drawer, but feel the left half of my body held back. Jack's telekinesis pulls me away, but I pull my hardest to push forward. It feels like my body is tearing itself apart, but I manage to grab hold of a knife inside the drawer and I toss it at Jack. He lets go of me to catch the knife just before it reaches him. I feel the metal of the knives. They're cold and hard, but I'm not even touching them. All in one mental motion, I feel them rising up and soaring up toward Jack. I can see I caught him off guard. In another moment, I close my eyes, and I'm gone. I'm floating in the space between dimensions. I don't even care which one I go to. I just need to get away. I need to find a place to regain my thoughts. I need to find someone to help. Bring me to anybody. I'm floating through the darkness, and then I see a sudden light ahead of me. I swim through the space to reach the light. I'm reaching closer and closer for it. I finally reach it and extend my arm out toward it. I get just one slight touch of the light, and I'm dragged in like a stray dust to evacuate. I awaken in the middle of a desolate city street. Buildings are in complete disarray around me. There is nobody around, and the whole place looks like it's been abandoned for years. I stand up and get my bearings, and I cough. Even the air around me tastes toxic. My brain is racing at 1,000,000 miles a minute, and my body is doing its best to catch up. I then hear a stray thought enter my mind. It freezes me to my core, and all other functions stop as soon as I hear it. Gavin. That is all. Just one single word in one unforgettable voice. I hear him. I hear Jay. I turn around in a full circle, looking for any sign of him. Nothing. Telepathy. It must be. I remember Micah saying something about me being able to talk with those like me like this. I notice it's gotten extremely dark outside and stars fill the skies. The two lights close in on me and I finally see them to be headlights. The car returns just as quickly as it had left. But the one difference is, this time, it isn't a vision. And this is where we're going to be ending today. We've covered a lot of story here, and next time we're going to be covering the events of the first Radical-9 story, Radical-9, as we cover the topics of Andrew Cress, Jen Cress, and the events of the Elysium Project. If you like this video, you can check out my books over on Amazon in paperback and hardcover form, digitally for download over on my Ko-fi, and web-based for free over on my Royal Road.